Good morning. This is Khalid Malik's Morning Jam on a Wednesday, which means that it's time for Green Hour. And we've been loving your feedback. Please keep sending us your feedback, your comments. This is Green Hour as we shed light on green initiatives. Our special guest this morning, she is no stranger to the show, by the way. Glad to have her back, although after a while. Architect, researcher Marvi Mazhar joins us this morning. She's been very busy these last couple of years. And researcher also. I want to talk more about the research that she has been doing. In fact, it's still underway, and the things that have been keeping her busy as she's been looking at how the coastline of Karachi has been changing by specific actions like land reclamations. But more about that in just a bit. Marvi Mazhar, thanks very much for joining us on Green Hour and welcome.
Thank you so much, Khalid. Always a pleasure to be on your show.
So most of us in the last 2 years, we were out and about just walking, not doing much really, just thinking about life. But yet here you are, walking, doing what we're doing, but with a slight difference in the sense that you were looking at things from a completely different perspective as you were on walkabout, as the Aborigines say. What were you doing? What came to mind as you went on some of these walkabouts?
So, as an architect, you're always so busy with your site work, with correspondence, with meeting people. And when the first COVID lockdown took place, my experience of working with the city kind of was taken away.
Yeah.
We all were in a shutdown space, and I was like, now what do I do? So after a week's time, being in the house, I took the courage and I was like, okay, fine, there is a lockdown, there's a complete shutdown from everywhere, and there's a check post, and you couldn't even go to your grocery store. I was like, all I can do maybe is early in the morning start walking, and those silent walks were where this work of mine, my huge body of my work during those last 2 years came about. And this took place me walking only for 1 kilometer, then I extended it for 2 kilometers, and I was just walking next to the edge.
यानी कि सीव्यू वाला जो edge है?
सीव्यू से भी पहले, so बॉन विस्टा वाली साइड से जहाँ पे साउथ एशिया टर्मिनल है. सही. So पहले वहाँ से I started my walk, and then I saw that it's very very quietly, जो पहले आपको समंदर बिल्कुल करीब नजर आता था, oyster rocks. Now one has to walk a lot to get to that edge, and then one experienced that kitni vastness aa gayi hai between the city and the water, and you saw this miles and miles of sand. I was like, okay, this was never there. I've been living here since 90s. So this kind of privilege of walking one didn't have, because one was so busy working in the city in an internal side. Now I was looking at the external side of the city. So from there I started walking till McDonald's. Then वहाँ पे गाड़ी खड़ी करी, फिर जाहिर सी बात है रोज walk करके I got bored, so I started going beyond that. Then from McDonald's to Imar, then Imar to Kurangi. So that's when the only my companion was my phone. Yeah. And I started picking up these visual documentations, sometimes taking sound recordings, sometimes taking visuals. And I didn't know what I was doing. It was unconsciously that I was picking up these details. Yeah.
And we want to talk about what that led to, or the questions that led to. But if we go back a little bit, take a few steps back and talk about architecture and architects. Essentially, primarily that's that's where it all comes from, correct? As training as an architect, and I've come across a lot of women recently that have graduated as architects. So it feels, and I've had the privilege of interacting with a few companies, and it feels like there is a growing number of women that are entering this field or this subject and graduating also. Is that translating out in the field?
It's incredible. I remember when I was working with Yasmin Lari, and all I could hear during our 5 or 10 minutes of casual moments, she used to always say how male dominating this profession was. And when I was studying and I was in my undergrad, 80% were women and the rest were men. So it's the same as how it's in medical systems. You doctors are more women and men are less. But then what happens is when you go in the field, when you are actually in your practice, it's when you really realize, although more women are in this practice, but still the systems and the thinking is very archaic, and it's like where they think like if there's a structure, then you will always ask for a man, but if it's interior, you will always go for a woman, and that's a very cliched way of looking at this space. So I guess now with this, with this lot of knowledge and new policies and new making, women have taken that space and are talking and kind of radically looking at spaces in a more structural manner rather than just interior.
So when you say new policies, what do you mean exactly?
So, there are through IAP and PCATP, Pakistan Association for Architects, where they have made it compulsory not to discriminate and not to make a gender difference in this profession. So there are conversations around it where architects are given that kind of like placemaking.
So there's still that sort of that boys' club, right? That still goes on.
It is, but it's usually also from developers' end and contractors' end. It's not like the architects' forum itself is quite liberal and quite like thinking together, thinking collective. But when it comes to working on site is when a developer will pass a comment or a contractor will say something which will, throw you off.
Yeah.
So those are the things that with time and experience one overcomes.
Now, with time and experience, you've changed your focus. Correct. Essentially, with heritage, am I getting that right? Now it's more now looking at the coastal belt and the effects that land reclamation has had on that, ecologically. On those walks, when you were doing this visual documentation, not knowing what this would lead to, was there? What was the epiphany, or what was the turning point for you? Was it a question? Was it what was the light bulb?
I think it was just a shift from. It was not like a. So my link when we say that from heritage, now one is looking at coast. The strange enough is that there is a very prominent link between the two. All I was looking and interested now in is an ecological heritage. Yeah. So it's not that I have moved away from heritage. My heritage will always be part of my narrative and my practice and my thinking with the city. So here what I was doing is from built environment, I started looking at the coastal environment, and both are heritage related, right? So here I started looking at ecology and infrastructural rupture, which I also see in Old Town, in heritage rupture. And where the Old Town is concerned, that built environment is concerned, is where the real developer is taking over past. And here I'm looking at liquid grounds, the coastal grounds, where a developer is constantly in making, giving you the best view on the 20th floor, but not thinking about the foundation and the sand that he's making on. What kind of heritage and indigenous conversations are we neglecting?
I've been in so many conversations, interesting, very recently, कि वो Clifton Bridge से पहले यहाँ कुछ नहीं होता था, जंगल था और यहाँ से समुद्र नजर आता था और यहाँ से वो और यहाँ से ये देखो क्या बन गया है ये. And this is again 90s वाली कोई बात है ना, late 80s 90s की बात होगी शायद. अब
उससे भी पहले, like if you look at the colonial maps, you'll see that Old Clifton was an island. There were more swamps, there were more wetlands. अब तो वो सब cover होता गया ना. So when I say when we talk about reclamation, actually, sorry, I'm just
absolutely.
So reclamation here is always considered as if like it's a new phenomena. It's something that the Phase 8 party is doing what they're doing.
The Phase 8 party.
But it's actually not that. It's not that new. It's actually quite through archives. It's the coastal port systems that were the first reclamation projects. So Port KPT ho gaya, Port Qasim ho gaya, abhi South Asia Terminal. These are what? These are power projects where they are taking over your water and developing this infrastructure for the city. But what will the city be able to accommodate such mega structures? Is it ready if something climatic disaster takes place? So because of these power projects, we forget that there is a very sensitive space in between the built environment and the ecological factor, and that is the soft grounds.
What when you say the built structure and the environment? How do you how do they connect?
So they connect through we got to consciously being documenting. Documentation is not just through maps and through visuals. It has to be done through sound documentation. It needs to be done through water level. So how much is the sea level increasing? And these are factors not just to do it in last 2-3 years. It has to be done through, you have to go back to last 10 years or 20 years to see where are we right now? How is KPT accommodating those decks with sea level increasing? So in that context, we don't have those archives. We don't have sound archives. Sound archives helps us in accommodating high rises. So अभी sea belt पे आप सारी ये tall buildings बना रहे हैं, but क्या आपको air pressure पता है? आपको air rights पता है? क्या ये बिल्डिंग ले सकती है? इसका मॉइस्चर कैसा है? इसका टेक्सचर कैसा है?
लेकिन असम्पशन ये नहीं कि जो हाई राइज वगैरह बिल्डिंग्स वो तो ये सब मद्देनजर रखते हुए ही बना रहे होंगे ना? नहीं, ऐसा नहीं है. We assume.
We're not even taking this kind of documentation or research into our work. We are not accommodating research into our work. We are accommodating bylaws. We are saying इस घर से दूसरा घर इतना दूर होगा, हमारा फसाड ये लगना चाहिए, but we are not looking at ecological documentation and research into our built environment. So when I am living in Seaview apartments, you can go back to 10 years of stories from the residents. They will tell us कि AC लगाना मुसीबत है, फ्रिज यहाँ पे हर 2 साल बाद खराब हो जाता है. So these are civil society voices that have not been accommodated into our work. Now, like for instance, if there is a tall high-rise on the edge of Seaview, which is a high-end building in a very privileged space, has a private beach to its own, and it has what kind of infrastructure? So it is an isolated space making, right? What relationship does it have to next to its spaces? Left पे क्या हो रहा है, right पे क्या हो रहा है? अच्छा, जो नीचे जमीन से लोग चलते हुए आते हैं, Chunky Monkey Village restaurant is, at some point they stop. They have to come back on the road. And then go back, and then the road and there's no sand after that.
No.
So what have you done? You've taken public space from that experience, and you are living in this isolated, gated community. So Karachi really needs to now, I think my perspective could be, which is also not just my own voice, but people I've been thinking with have been saying that Karachi doesn't need a development plan. Karachi actually needs a rehabilitation plan and preservation plan. And that preservation plan is not just for heritage and old town. It's a ecological, like my last project, for example, was banyan tree. That was just a small seed in this large context. Okay, maybe it will show some ripple effect, and the government will learn from it and accommodate in other parts of the city, be it near Gizri or be it in garden area where there are old trees there. So, civil society can't do everything. It needs to be done in a partnership.
What was your research exactly?
It was conflicted imaginaries of the city, infrastructural imaginaries.
So in layman's terms, that would mean?
All the the urban periphery of Karachi, which is the coast.
And how that's been affected, and how that's been taken by force. Was that the word you used? I don't know. What's the word? Illegal? What's the word? I don't know what the word is, but that's the word.
I think you're on the right track.
I'm on the right track. It's interesting how we go from a place of मुझे समंदर नजर आता था तो मुझे समंदर नजर नहीं आता.
समंदर की चोरी हो गई.
समंदर की चोरी हो गई है. क्या बात है?
ये एक आसिफ साहब ने एक बहुत जबरदस्त कहानी लिखी थी. And he said it in his he and I used to share a lot of stories together. तो उनमें से एक ये कहानी थी which resonated the most, and it's in a book. It's called Stealing from the Sea, and है लिखी भी उर्दू में, समंदर की चोरी होगी. So I have to tell you this really interesting story. So ये हम अपने students को भी बहुत पढ़ाते हैं. I never thought that this will be a point of entry point into my work.
Wow.
So Asif Saab passed away in COVID के दौरान, and that was when I had just started documenting and reading and learning. And the story was, of course, the back of my mind was there. But मगर जब मैंने वो article लिखा था Dawn में, so my starting was from समंदर की चोरी. And when the case went in the court, I loved how that article was read by the justice, and he loudly said कि आपने समंदर की चोरी कर ली, and one could just hear Asif Saab laughing कि I can't believe my fiction has gotten into factual grounds as part of a case. So it was quite like, I mean, it was something like my maybe a thank you for Asif Saab. Yeah.
Everything I feel Marvi acts as a vessel.
Some way, yeah.
You know? So with this chori and your research, can you give us a little maybe abstract of what this research says?
So Khalid, it says like, you know, what I did was I started working on a lot of maps, and I started looking at perspective of like till where have we started building. तो पहले हिस्ट्री में टाइमलाइन में गई मैंने देखा कि जो ब्लॉक 2 से स्टार्ट होता है साउथ एशिया टर्मिनल से, वहाँ पे सेटबैक है, समंदर है, सैंड है, एम्यूनिटी प्लॉट है, और फिर मेन सर्विस लेन है, मेन रोड है, फिर सर्विस लेन है, और फिर बिल्डिंग्स हैं. सो दैट इज अ लॉट ऑफ स्पेस मेकिंग टिल द सी. ये ईदी सितार रोड तक पूरा जाता है, जहाँ तक आपका विलेज है. वहाँ के बाद एक शिफ्ट आता है, वो मेन रोड जो चले जा रहा है वो जाके टर्न होता है, एंड फिर E8 आ जाता है. सही. नाउ E8 में क्या होता है, विच इज माई बिगेस्ट पार्ट ऑफ आर्ग्यूमेंट इज that now this road is supposed to go straight all the way around the phase 8, but it shifts and it goes back in where the sea is, and वो road पतला हो जाता है E8 की तरफ.
When you pass the E8 sign, you go further in,
and you go in right, and now you're driving along the sea, and there is no amenity, there's no space making, there is a boundary wall, and then नीचे समंदर है, और वहाँ पे सारा आपके plots हैं end तक. अब वो कैसे है, वो क्यों है? It's the biggest question. That you have literally gone right till the edge of the sea. Where is the buffer? So ecology and environmental laws आपको कहता है कि you have to keep a buffer between the sea and the property. Already आपने you did not learn, and you do your relearnings and your unlearnings through whatever you've heard from history. So CVO apartments वाले कब से हैं? उन्हें चीख रहे हैं, वो कब से बोल रहे हैं कि हवा हमारी चीज़ों को ख़राब कर देता है. Now when you have these buildings right next to the water, what kind of life are you giving to those people, those residents? And what are you building upon? You know, you're building upon on coast, on water. उसके नीचे तो पानी है सारा.
बिल्कुल सही.
So land reclamation itself needs to be questioned, that how it's being done, what is the nature of it, how was it, what is the mechanism of that? We don't know. There are no studies and there are no drawings available.
So when you say a couple of things, one, talk about the buffer, and B, so we're not saying don't reclaim land, we're saying you can do it.
Do it ethically.
But do it ethically,
yes.
Correct? So if we go to the first bit, the buffer, when you say between the sea or the water body and the property, are we talking roads as property, or are we talking...
Road is a in-between space. It's an infrastructure, right? But then there is a soft ground, which is a sand. Then there is like a preservation guarding कि इसके बाद that's public. So between public and private, you've taken away that space.
लेकिन जो बाहर आपको नजर आता है कि जैसे कहते हैं ना कि water front properties which are on the water pretty much, वो फिर ये भी कैसे वहाँ पे तो हो रहा है ना, यहाँ क्यों नहीं हो सकता?
मगर फिर वहाँ पे रप्चर भी तो देखे ना, मियामी में बिल्डिंग गिर गई अभी 1-1.5 साल पहले. सॉफ्ट ये जो शिफ्टिंग ग्राउंड्स होते हैं, इनको क्यों कहते हैं शिफ्टिंग ग्राउंड्स? सो आई नो दैट देयर इज अ हंगर ऑफ डेवलपर हु नीड्स टू मेक दीज बिल्डिंग्स एंड हु इज talking about the best skyline of the city. They're always obsessed with that skyline, right? But can we afford it in South Asia? Can we as like developing nation afford that kind of skyline?
So what will tell us if we can, if we can't?
The nature, the climate, what's changing, what's happening in the other worlds. I mean, we've seen it in so many places where the rupture has taken place. In our own city, I mean, 2 years or 1.5 years ago when the monsoon took place, that was the biggest sign for us to learn from that.
Yeah. So when we talk of the environment and its connection with architecture and building, and we talk about, well, can do it, but do it ethically, is what we're saying, correct? So what is happening right now as we speak with regards to a lot of the land reclamation that has already happened?
So my biggest concern is the carbon footprint. What kind of, if we look at on aerial level, if we look at Karachi right now, We only see concretization of the city.
Yeah.
We hardly see green spaces. We hardly see giving back to the neighborhood. The trees which are growing are all non-strategic. They are not local. And the people who are growing within their four walls. But what about the outside?
Right.
So when you are driving on Shehbaz, Etihad, you can feel the sun in your car. There's hardly anything that's being like, saying these are resting spaces.
Yeah.
This is a bench here. You make these nexus into the neighborhood. You accommodate those. Where is the policy for that? So I have a huge critique on the master planning of the city, even the privileged areas or the expensive areas. Forget what's happening in informal settlement where there is no space to grow a tree. So I mean, it's not that I'm saying that that's the only solution, but we got to see real estate on terrace levels. If there is a vertical building, we have to accommodate on rooftops. We have to accommodate into terraces. Real estate doesn't end on horizontal or on the land itself. Real estate is on हमारी रूफ. आप कभी सैटेलाइट इमेज को खोलें और देखें, सबके रूफ ग्रे नजर आते हैं. We are not accommodating roof gardens into our design because we have this fear of किसी पे जो जाएगा. So then the architect is supposed to accommodate those things. Why are we only looking at gardens as ground surfaces? Gardens can be on top levels as well. Where is urban gardening and producing your own food? So those kind of food security and green movement needs to be taken place on neighborhood levels. It can't be taken on a city level.
Is the government listening?
You tell me.
Pause. There's a pause there. I ain't saying nothing. But I know that the article that you went on has been taken up.
I've had some good experiences, I must say that. I shouldn't negate completely.
Yeah.
I had a very, very good team working with me when we were doing banyan trees.
Yeah.
Recently, the way Do Talwar has been restored. There are moments, I mean, there is Pakistan Chowk experience. But what happens is, Khalid, is the lack of maintenance and lack of follow-up. You can't just make a project and leave. There needs to be a monitoring, there needs to be a relationship with that project. And we miss out on that. That's why the city looks so broken.
It does look broken. And it's interesting saying, we don't need a master plan, but we need rehabilitation. What does that mean? For a Karachi, what does that, I mean, that sounds good. What does it mean?
It means that, you have to monitor the city through. So you are fixed, you're making new. You're all the time thinking of how can we implement new projects, right? So how about looking at abandoned structures, looking at abandoned spaces, empty spaces. I know that Murtaza Wahab is very keenly opening public parks in a lot of areas, and that's good, absolutely. But it can't be just opening. It needs to have a relationship. You need to give it to the neighborhood to take care of it by giving them incentives. This is the biggest question. I mean, we can totally go into another direction, but a lot of people ask, like, why is Old Town looking the way it is? Because there are no incentives for those people living in those old buildings. In anywhere else in the world, you get tax incentives. You get some kind of in return, that if you're living in a heritage building. We can't even come to that conversation right now, because वो तो पहले ही इतना problematic है within. So I mean, we can't always think about from nostalgic and romantic way to look at the city. You have to move on.
And it's very interesting. It's only so we have guests over, and I've been playing the tour guide, a very lousy one, but tour guide nonetheless. और मुझे जब मैं बता रहा होता हूँ कि ये फ्रेयर हॉल है, एक ज़माने में ये टाउन हॉल हुआ करता था, और ये 60s के दौर में एक बजिंग होटल था जिसका नाम है मेट्रोपोल, ये इस वक्त खंडर है और यहाँ पर जो थे, यहाँ पर ये एक नाइट लाइफ होती थी कराची की, और यहाँ पर ये होता था, और यहाँ पर कायद आज़म के कपड़े, यहाँ पर उनका जो दर्जी है वो यहाँ पर वो nothing there. मतलब we're talking about rehabilitation of the abandoned, या बंद रोड चले जाएं, वहाँ के जो अपार्टमेंट्स हैं, ये देखें उस ज़माने के आर्किटेक्चर है, लेकिन अभी किसी वक्त भी गिर सकते हैं. I get, is that what you mean by rehabilitation? Like, look at the stuff that we already have, जो बिल्कुल जैसे लगता है खंडरात हो गए हैं, गिरने वाले इमारतें जो भी हैं, उसको नहीं आप बस नए सड़कें बना रहे हैं, नए अंडरपास ओवरपास बना रहे हैं, और उसके अलावा आप नई बिल्डिंग पे बिल्डिंग खड़ी कर रहे हैं. लेकिन ये जो है ये अभी am I on the right track here?
Yeah, totally. So the word that needs to be completely abolished is beautification plan. Okay, from the government's language. We don't need beautification. we need preservation. If you have planted a tree, don't forget that tree.
Right.
उसको पानी तो 2-4 साल तक, तब तक वो अपनी जड़ें तो पकड़े.
सही.
ये दरख्त लगा के चले जाना. Which person has kept on visiting back again and documenting that? In cities like Calcutta and Mumbai, which is not that far away, it's next door. They have tree ki mapping ke plans in their city. They know exactly when somebody else comes and plants a new tree. Where is our inventory? So this is it's a very high level kind of mapping projects, but I'm not talking about some other developed nation. I'm talking about our neighboring country. So what we need is, and I know that in your previous program Mahim also talked about where is our documentation and where is our mapping. We got to have that. If we don't have it, we will never be able to make solutions or think with people or neighborhoods, because we don't have any relevance. We always start new. We always start from scratch. And we love developing parallel. मैंने कुछ कर लिया तो आप मेरी learnings नहीं लेंगे, आप अपनी learning खुद अपना नया काम करेंगे side में. So I think that's a huge problem. It's a very individual kind of a society. First, I remember when listening with my parents, they had a lot of trust with the government. They could have left their belongings in National Museum. Now they don't. Now they have this fear of कि वहाँ जाएगा तो चोरी हो जाएगा. Now where, I mean again off the topic completely, but there are some colonies, and my Parsi friends, they talk about that they have such beautiful furniture pieces where they would like to give it to a museum. They're all pre-partition owned objects. एक कबाड़ा आता है, वो एक wholesome price देता है और वो ले जाता है. We are losing out on heritage on all levels. I can talk about loss of heritage as like a new show altogether. So it's on and they don't want to part with those objects. They want those objects to go in. So we don't even have a people's museum in the city, which has so much heritage and stories. So forget about ecological heritage. Non-human and human की तो हम बात कर रहे हैं अभी जाके. It's now that we are talking about animal rights and we are talking about species living on the sea. When will they be accommodated? Their voice, when will that be part of the construction and design plans?
जब आप देखते हैं लैंड और ये जो बिल्डिंग्स बन रही है, जो भी कुछ आर्किटेक्चर आपको नजर आता है, समंदर किनारे जो भी है, एक सवाल है कि और कितना जाएंगे आगे?
Exactly.
So
बस कर जाए
नहीं तो और जा रहे हैं. I mean, is there a stop now that the justice has received, there's
it's still going on, so we don't know what the I mean, we don't know where it will go, but we do know that it's on hold, the reclamation part. And but let's see, but what happened to people who, then that's another sensitive topic, which is what about those people who have invested in those lands? Why will they get dent into their pockets? Right. So it's so corrupt, and this whole system back and forth of this hunger of making new land. What does this new land will do? Real estate development, but again another part to a rupture. Till the sea backfires and come as a tsunami, God forbid, or something. Till when are we going to say that the city is being safeguarded by the saints? Do we have a role model in the world that says, listen, if you want waterfront, here it is. Here's a role model. They're doing it ethically, and they're taking in the environment into account, and the biodiversity and all of that, and they're making is there a? Khalid, first of all, you got to start with this grassroots level of knowledge making, awareness programs, making environment studies part of your school systems. If you go to places like Thailand, you go to Sri Lanka, you go to Cambodia, you see there is a love of land.
Sri Lanka.
Right? There is this tourism aspect which vandalizes a lot. They make money out of it, but when you speak to them, they speak it as if it's like truly their motherland. उनको प्यार है अपनी ज़मीन से. हमारे यहाँ पे मुसीबत ये है कि हमारे को अपनी ज़मीन से रियल स्टेट प्यार है. हमें इमोशनल प्यार नहीं है अपनी ज़मीन से. And when you are sitting in Sri Lanka at any waterfront, you will see when people are serving and talking to you, they will talk to you in a very accommodating way towards the environment. Almost like family.
And so what is the situation right now as of today with your research and it being taken up, the land reclamation as an issue being taken up in courts? What is happening right now?
Well, that's ongoing right now, so one can't talk more about it. I'm sure in newspapers it keeps coming. What's the ongoing situation? But my research now has extended out towards more on beyond the city. So it's wherever towards the Gwadar, the water, how it's going and how that land is now being utilized. So I'm interested in that. I'm looking at waterfronts from industrial waste as well. And simultaneously, right now, like as we speak, I'm also looking, I'm interested in going back to the residents' voices whose buildings got damaged during the monsoon. So what we do is we forget very easily, and it's important to go back and see that how much has changed or have people moved on. So I'm collecting that.
एक सवाल है मारवी कि जो कराची में जो कुछ हो रहा है लैंड रिक्लेमेशन, उससे शायद हमने सबक हासिल नहीं किया, लेकिन जो बाकी कोस्टल लाइन है और माड़ा और ये वो जो कुंड वलीर वाले, वहाँ पर हम कुछ
देखिए वहाँ पे अब जो है एक अलग it's a lot of securitization, there's a lot of militarization around that area. Then people who are running tourism based facilities, there are no policies, so there's a lot of again vandalism. But the good thing is that there are a lot of people from that village who are taking care. So they are doing partnership with. So there are a lot of partnership based models. So a person from urban city is investing and making a tourist site, and the people who are working with them are the locals. ठीक है. पर अब उससे होता क्या है कि sometimes when you are when money and economics comes in between that kind of trade, then you forget that environment is being damaged. And we have seen this in many places. Now in the north, it's happening. Suddenly when the government said that come and invest, so a lot of people have gone and started buying lands and started building over there in unethical manner, not looking at the height or the relationship to the mountains. लोग प्लास्टिक लेके जा रहे हैं. So वो सब चीजें जो हैं उसका जरूरी है policy making के साथ relationship.
What I love and my takeaway from this is that we don't need state of the art urban planning. We need rehabilitation, and that for me is my takeaway. What would you say in closing to the youth in particular that are listening to you today?
Well, my response to that would be that please understand your city, not just from a perspective of where you live, but also understand the governance systems. Look at them on Twitter, what they are projecting, what are they developing, and analyze those things. If there is a project being implemented, you should know why is it being implemented. Because don't go for this encroachment drive is a positive thing because they're clearing up and making a road, but they're also taking a lot of human rights. So it's important for youth to learn, and the biggest learning doesn't come from like global understanding. It comes from within your own neighborhood. So learn about that, go to the websites, read about policies, read about environmental degradation, read about what construction means within your. You don't have to be an architect for that. It's a constitutional right to know why is somebody building a high rise in your backyard, because then आपकी हवा रुकेगी, आपकी रोशनी रुकेगी. तो आपको पता होना चाहिए कि पिटिशन कैसे मार्क करते हैं, किस तरह आपको पता होना चाहिए कि आपकी अगर शैडो कम हो रहा है घर का तो वो क्यों हो रहा है, क्योंकि एक पीछे illegal building बन रही है.
Marvi, Mazhar, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Can we get you on Instagram and on Facebook if we'd like to DM?
They can for sure find me on Twitter. It's Marvi Mazhar. And my Instagram is Master MM.
Instagram Master MM?
Yeah. In my college, my friends used to call me Master Saab.
Master MM on Instagram. On that, thanks so much for joining us on Green Hour. This is Green Hour. Returns Wednesday at 10 to 11 a.m. Love to hear your feedback as always. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll catch you again. May your news be good news.
FM91 presents Green Hour on Khalid Malik's Morning Jam. Watch the episodes on digital platforms of FM91, News 1 and TV1.